I'm Dr. Duke, and today I am joined by Stewart Jones, a state representative in South Carolina, 14th District. Stewart, we had a chance to talk to you once before about gun issues, and it was a very productive conversation. I'd like to talk to you today, if you don't mind, about local control. We keep hearing that maybe the big battle we have in this country right now, whether it's education or whether it's guns or whether it's 1,000 different things. The Democrats, the progressives, are pushing us to more centralization, more federalization, more oversight, more big government. And yet conservatives, like you, I believe, are arguing exactly the opposite. The way to go is not to federalize, not to collectivize, but let's empower what the founding fathers wanted. Individuals living in individual communities, being able to make real decisions for their own families and the places that they live. Talk a little bit about local control and what it means in South Carolina.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me today. And what really got me fired up and made me take notice of how to take control, take back liberty at the local level was actually the 2012 NDAA that granted the federal government the ability to indefinitely detain U.S. citizens without trial or jury. And that really, I said, I really need to get involved. So I started going speaking at my county council, city council meetings, and raising awareness to that issue. And then when my council member wouldn't do anything about it, I ran for office and we won and were able to work with local law enforcement, the sheriff's office in particular, to defend due process. We were able to pass ordinances at the local level that reinforce our Bill of Rights. And so that's kind of how I got involved in this. And I like to think about it as, often I think we see what's going on in Washington and we think, that's the root of the problem in the country. And Washington has a lot to do with it. However, it's here at the local level that we're supposed to be able to take back that authority, and that's what our Constitution did, especially under the 9th and 10th Amendments.
And your story, you just kind of recap for us, is classic local involvement, right? Here you went to your representative, you had an issue, you didn't get the answer you wanted, you ran and you became the councilman, and now you're able to deal with this. And I think that's really wonderful. It demonstrates, I think, the spirit and the ethos of what the founders wanted. This kind of government works because nobody knows better your constituents than you do. Why would we expect somebody in the State House all the time? Why would we expect somebody in Washington, D.C. to know exactly what's going on with your people? It's a kind of arrogance about that the founding fathers didn't like. Let me ask you then, so knowing your district and knowing your people, can you give us some examples besides due process of the kind of things in your district where if we gave more local control we could get done? What problems do you think we could solve if we had more local involvement and less oversight government?
Education is a huge area to where the federal government has taken a lot of the local control. People can take that back though very easily. Part of the problem, though, that I've seen at the state level as well is there's so much money coming from the federal government pumping into the local education system that people are afraid to take that responsibility back in a lot of ways. But that's a core issue in our country. The federal government has no authority over education. That's not what the founders intended at all. And so the more that we can localize that control of education, put it back in the hands of the parents, the teachers, back at the local level, the better the system's going to be.
I've given about 800 talks on education issues across the country, 48 states. Had the privilege of being a speaker in South Carolina 6 or 7 years ago, and I really appreciate what you're saying there. The biggest problem we found is kind of what you just sketched out there, is that most states have local control of education in name only, right? But it's the state level administrators who took federal dollars and then imposed this on South Carolinians. I mean, there were no school boards that voted for Common Core. Teachers weren't consulted about this. God knows moms and dads who pay huge taxes to fund these schools weren't consulted. So local control is there in your state, like it's in my state, Wisconsin, and yet there was no local control when our states were swallowed up by Common Core. How do you think we can fix that other than cutting off the supply of money from the feds?
Yeah. And lots of times it's difficult to connect those dots to see what to do next. I believe the incremental approach can work, though. And unfortunately, we've seen the left use that approach in so many different areas. And so school choice. I'm a big proponent of school choice. In South Carolina, I'm also a proponent of charter schools. The public charter school system has given some competition, some alternative to just saying this is where your child is zoned to go to school and you have no other choice. So I think you have to look at where you are and you know in the country, and you can decide an incremental approach to actually take back education. Eventually, we're going to get there, but we've got to start, and some of those things are ways that we can start to take back our education.
Let me ask you a question, because I've seen charter and vouchers. I love it. I love the idea of school choice. The more options of parents have, that's free market capitalism. But what I'm alarmed to see in states across the country, to the degree that charter and voucher schools take federal or state money, and almost all of them do, I've seen state governments then turn around and say, okay, well, you opened a classical school, you're not teaching Common Core, kids are flocking to your school from the public school. Oh, but we're paying for this at the state of in South Carolina, and so we need you to take our Common Core test. We need you to take that big federal test. How would you, if you have the opportunity, how will you try to protect school choice from the argument, since the state's paying for it, sooner or later you have to dance to our tune?
Yeah, and a lot of those things too. I just want to say real quickly, Dylan, like you mentioned, the test. That's something that all these mandated tests that the teachers are spending so much time, they don't like them. It's not good for the students. It's just a bad situation. So, but ultimately, the ways to do it. So, our Constitution, Article 6, actually gives us the ability, and I say it. What it says is that laws that are contrary to our Constitution are notwithstanding. And then you can also look at the 9th and 10th Amendment. So ultimately, I think the state has to decide that that it's right to give this back to local school boards, that politicians don't know how to make these decisions, nor should they make these decisions for local school boards and the parents and everybody. And so you have to return that responsibility back to the local level. Very hard to cut off the funding. I saw this past year, my state passed the largest budget in the history of the state of South Carolina, $30 billion. And from what I could see, what I could actually see in our budget, $9 billion of those dollars came from the federal government. And I voted against that budget. We've got to have more legislators, more people step up, though, and refuse to take the funding and say this isn't right. We want to have more localized control.
And I'll bet you any money that when you look at education budgets, that you're getting probably no more than 8%, 7-8% from the federal government to run South Carolina schools. Let me ask you, have you given any thought to what would your answer be if I said, okay, you're only getting 7% of the federal budget. If we turned that back to the feds, refused to take it, where would you try to raise that missing 7%? What ideas would you have to try to help fund local schools locally?
I think ultimately the solution, the goal is also the solution, and that's allowing parents to have more choice in their child's education. A lot of the costs that you look at, and the reason education, healthcare, a lot of those things cost so much is because the government has tried to control everything. And so I think if you can return that responsibility back to parents, teachers, everybody at the local level, then you can also lower the cost of education.
We've got about 20 seconds left, so not time for a real question, but let me ask, how can anybody interested nationwide in your program and your profile, how can they find you?
Yeah, please go to votestu.com. That's my website, and I do my updates there, and I'm kind of a blog there on what's going on. Just be sure to follow me on Twitter, Jones for Liberty.
Stewart Jones, representative of South Carolina, 14th District. Thank you so much for your time today. We're going to be watching your career as it unfolds.
Thank you, Dr. Dugan. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.